In this BrightSign technical training module, we will discuss preparing a BrightSign player for use on the BrightSign network. We've talked in other modules about the various publishing methods that are supported by BrightSign players. BrightSign players can be managed by publishing directly to a memory card. You can publish to players over the local area network. You can publish to players using an intermediary web server. We call this simple file networking. Or you can manage players using the BrightSign Network hosted service that we offer. And in this module, we'll focus specifically on setting up players to operate using this service. The BrightSign Network is a hosted service that we operate up in the cloud. Therefore, on either side of this service, on the one side BrightAuthor and on the other side your BrightSign players, an internet connection is required. On the machine running BrightAuthor, a public internet connection is required, and the BrightSign player needs a connection to the internet. Otherwise, nothing else is required. Everything needed to operate this service is installed, operated, maintained, and backed up by us here at BrightSign. This is a hosted service up in the cloud. The nice thing about this service is it is very complete. It offers you all the tools you need to deliver content, manage players, and to be aware at any moment of the health and well-being of all the players in your network. We undertake to manage the maintenance, backup, and redundancy tasks that are required in this day and age to offer an enterprise class service with a high degree of uptime. Using the BrightSign network, you'll have tools to distribute presentations worldwide to any number of players, monitor the activity and status of all of those players, perform a wide range of network administrative functions, including setting up new users with their own account access, defining their roles and assigning their permissions, and to perform a wide range of management and troubleshooting tasks on players no matter where they are in the world. In this module, however, we're going to focus specifically on setting up a player to operate on the BrightSign network. Detail on these other tasks will be covered in other modules. Before we begin, I need to answer a few basic questions. First, I need to know the type of Ethernet connection my player will have. Is it a physical connection, direct to the Ethernet and therefore the public internet, or is it a Wi-Fi connection? Our XD players offer Wi-Fi module options that would need to be installed. Our HD players offer no such option. If it's a Wi-Fi connection, I'm going to need to know the name of that Wi-Fi network, often referred to as the network's SSID, and I will also need to know the security key for that network. I need to know how IP addresses are assigned on my network. Most common is an automatic method known as dynamic, or DHCP. DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Control Protocol, and it's a system whereby new devices are assigned IP connection information when they attach and turn on the network. It's fully automatic. But in some cases, DHCP is not used, and it will be necessary to manually configure the IP address information for your player. If that's the case, you're going to need to know the specific IP address, the subnet mask, the gateway server, and domain name server addresses, sometimes simply called the DNS server. This information will be needed to configure the player. If you don't have it, you won't be able to finish your installation. You'll also need some basic information about your BrightSign network account. Only 3 pieces of information are required. You'll need to know the name of the account, your username on the account. Keep in mind that there might be multiple users, so one account might be shared by multiple users who all have different responsibilities as regards maintaining this network. Your username is your email address, the email address that was used when you were created as a user on the account, and a password. Each user has a unique password. So with this information in hand, the account name, your username, which is your email address, and your unique password, you'll be ready to proceed. If you know the type of Ethernet connection In my case, it will be a physical hardwired connection. If you know how IP addresses are assigned on your network, in my case, it's automatic via DHCP. And if you know your BrightSign Network login information, which I do, then you're ready to proceed to set up a player. Here we are at my desktop. I'm going to insert a blank SD card. Here, it's appeared here, and double check to see that it is in fact blank. I'm also going to check the properties on this card just to be sure that it's formatted FAT. In this case, it's FAT32. Any of the FATs are fine. It could be FAT, FAT8, FAT16, FAT32. FAT32 is most common. No other format method is supported when using a player on the BrightSign network. Mine is FAT32, so it's ready to go. So this card, labeled drive I, is available. We'll set that aside and start BrightAuthor. The first thing to do is to make sure that BrightAuthor is enabled for use on the BrightSign network. On the Edit menu, under Preferences, I check the Networking tab and make sure that the BrightSign network is enabled. The moment I say OK, additional tabs will show up here on the BrightSign network account, and I'll get a status over here that I'm not signed in. Remember, you need to know your username and password. You also need to know the account name. So that's the next step, is to sign in. On the Tools menu, a Sign In to BrightSign Network option is offered. It remembers the last account name and username that was used and waits for a password. You can set BrightAuthor to remember this information so that every time you start BrightAuthor, it automatically signs you in. I'm now signed in, and the Manage tab has appeared. So I'm ready to go. Now I'm going to leave BrightAuthor and come back, and you'll note that because I had selected that BrightAuthor should remember my login information, I'm automatically logged in as simply as part of starting BrightAuthor. So it will log me in each time. In the BrightSign network, there's a concept of players in groups. So when you choose to publish to the BrightSign network, you're going to be asked which group of players you want to publish to. And on the Manage tab, you can see the groups that exist in your account. If I want a new group, I simply say Add New Group and give it a name. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on BrightSign network management functions. I just needed to cover a few very basic concepts. So within a group, I could have some number of players, and each group is going to run a schedule. So the goal here is to get my player assigned to a group, so that when I publish to that group, the player will, along with all the other players in that group, be brought up to date to run that schedule. To set up a player, I choose Set Up a BrightSign Unit. I'm given here the familiar BrightSign Unit setup screen that we've seen in other modules, and I'm going to give my player a name and description. These can be anything you wish them to be. That's free. Those are free form fields. You can type whatever you want. I'm going to choose whether or not I need to use Wi-Fi. Now in my case, I've got a physical connection, but if I needed to use Wi-Fi, I would enter the SSID and key here, but I don't. So I'm going to disable Wi-Fi, make sure wired is in first position, and under Advanced Network Setup, I'm going to choose wired and specify connection settings. Here, obtain an IP address automatically. Remember, I mentioned that on our network we use DHCP, so it's all automatic. If it were not automatic, I would use the following IP address information, and I would manually configure these settings: the IP address, the subnet mask, the default gateway server address, and the DNS server address. DNS 2 and 3, those are optional. Some networks have optional redundant DNS servers, but at a minimum these first 4 fields need to be completed. We offer rate limiting, which is a method for regulating the amount of bandwidth the player consumes I'll discuss these options in another module in more detail. I'm simply going to accept the defaults at this point and say OK. Oops, see, I've got to choose automatic. Now I'll say OK. With those settings set to automatic and my time zone selected, the diagnostic web server is not required. I'm going to leave that unchecked. We'll talk about this option in another module. Here I'll choose networked with the BrightSign Network, and I'm presented here with a list of groups. See the new group I created earlier in this module? It's here and ready to be used. I've got other players here. I'm going to choose the XD player group because I want this new player to become part of that group, and I can check the frequency that the player will update itself. Logging features are not going to be used. They're not required. These are optional, so I'm going to leave these turned off. In other modules, I'll discuss what these features are for. This player is ready to be configured. I'll say create setup files, choose my SD card, and say OK. It didn't take long. These files are not big. I'll close this screen. Let's take a look at my SD card, and we see here that yes, in fact, data has been put to the card. These files aren't huge, and so the card appears essentially empty. This card is ready to be put in my player. I'll take the card to my player, plug it into my player, and start the device. Now, what's going to happen? The player is going to boot. Note on the card that has been configured for access to a BrightSign Network account. Notice that in my setup screen, nowhere was I asked about a username, password, or account name. That information simply is not there. Yet somehow the player is going to know what account to connect to. That's because I'm already logged in. Because I'm logged into the BrightSign Network, BrightAuthor already knows what account this player belongs to. And it has already presented, as part of the setup, the groups that exist in that account and are ready to be used. So all of this flows through from the fact that I have logged in before I began the process. So as the player connects, it will connect for the very first time, join the BrightSign Network account, and move itself into the group that was assigned during setup. Don't be concerned if this process takes a minute or two. There are several variables here involved. One, the speed of the network that the player has attached. And two, also the size of the project that needs to be downloaded. When we move to the Manage tab, we can see now that my player has in fact joined the group. Here it is, and it's checking in every 30 seconds. There's when it last checked in, and we can also see the project that was scheduled to run and that the player is running that project. When I right click, I can see basic information about the player. We'll cover this in other modules, and I can also see the status of any download that's underway to that player. This one downloaded pretty quick because we have a nice fast network here in the building, and because that project is small. But that's it. This player is alive and well, and I can now publish any project to this player, and actually all the players in this group, simply by moving to the Publish tab, choosing the BrightSign Network, choosing the group that I wish to publish to. I'll delete what's there, grab an available presentation, select that for all day, every day, and choose Publish. BrightAuthor talks to the BrightSign Network service. The BrightSign Network service talks back to BrightAuthor, and in a moment I get the note that that schedule has been published to this player group. I can move to the Manage tab. I can look at that player group and see that that in fact project has been scheduled to that player. The player's not running it yet. We can check the status of downloads and see that downloads are underway. When those downloads are complete, the player will switch to this project, and the same will be true for any number of players that might be part of that group. So as you can see, getting a player up and running on the BrightSign network is a pretty straightforward task. The real key, and often the biggest challenge, is assuring that the player has a working internet connection. That's not something I can help you with in this training module. That's something you'll need to take care of with your own IT folks. This concludes setup training to connect a BrightSign player to the BrightSign network.